My name is Kenneth Reeve. My teacher is Mrs. Weber. Class is ELA A30, and this is my final assignment portfolio in preparation for my interview. An example of an assignment that I did where I followed the steps in order to ensure I met all the requirements was a critical analysis essay. First, I started out with the tracking sheet as I read through the novel The Secret Lives of Sergeant John Wilson. Next, I completed the essay planning and development planning sheets. This sheet helped me to ensure that I had information that was necessary to begin writing my rough draft of the essay. Once I had written my rough draft, I used the tool of color coding my information in order to ensure that each paragraph had all the necessary content. The highlighting process showed me that there were places that I had to further develop before beginning my final draft. My final draft was completely finished and submitted for grading on September 21st. Although I had all the components necessary for the assignment, I could have worked harder at being consistent in my writing and using more detail. To show my planning process through two different assignments, orally and written, I chose to use the Sergeant John Wilson multimedia. I came up with a timeline of events that occurred in the novel. Then I found imagery for each event that I had decided to use, and then I decided which information I was going to convey through writing on the slides and which I was going to convey through orally. I made two renditions of the assignment. One was a slideshow visually, and the other was the oral recording for each event. I put these two together in one final multimedia project that gave a timeline of events that occurred in the novel The Secret Lives of Sergeant John Wilson. I stated how these events affected Canadian history and gave literary examples of things like foreshadowing to demonstrate my understanding of the novel. My next piece of evidence shows my progression through the metacognitive process. In this AR, I showed the short and long-term goals that I set out at the beginning of the class and then see how I am doing with them. When reflecting on these goals, I realize that I haven't worked at completing these goals to the best of my ability. I feel that these AR activities have done a very good job of making me reflect on my work. Reflecting was never something that I did prior to doing online schooling, but now I see how important and effective it really is. The CC task that I most enjoyed was the poetry multimedia. This assignment gave me a chance to show the images that popped into my head while reading the poem. The poem that I decided to do was If Language Is Not Strange by Brian Henderson. This poem created a lot of imagery in my head while I read it. When I closed my eyes, I was able to see the waving palms and waves of the ocean. I could hear the wind, and it was amazing to be able to share that imagery through my voice and pictures. The CC task that I most disliked writing was the editorial. I dislike this assignment because it can be difficult for me at times to sit down and find research from different sources and try not to be repetitive or plagiarize. If I were to give myself a mark out of 5 on how well I completed this course, I would give myself a 4. I chose this mark because I was able to complete the CR and AR sections of this course with over 90% averages. If I were to redo anything, I would have put more effort into the CC areas of this class. In a lot of my CC tasks, it was not big mistakes that brought down my marks, but a lot of small mistakes that added up. For example, on assignment 7.4, writing an editorial, you can really see this as I got a 70% on this assignment. The reason for this low mark isn't because I got 1 or 2 out of 5 on any criteria, but because I got a lot of 4s and 3s out of 5s. I think the piece of text that I most enjoyed was Now That the Buffalo Is Gone by Buffy St. Marie. I said this because I find it interesting how a poem can be performed through speech and through song. This poem also spoke to me as it is a call to action and it inspired me to see what I can do in my community. Because of this story and others in this course and in my History 30 course, I chose to attend a blanket exercise and reconciliation retreat in Melville, Saskatchewan. The visual piece of text that I was the least interested in was a presentation by a tribe called Red called the Electric Powwow. I was disinterested because I don't believe that premise of the video to be true the majority of the time. I believe that most Canadians are aware that every culture within Canada has times of ceremonial celebrations, and most of us don't judge these events as being the sole personification of that race or culture. I don't believe that the tribe called Red is giving enough credit to their fellow Canadians and their ability to know the difference between ceremonial celebrations and a cultural way of life. I believe that meeting these curriculum objectives helps students to view the many stereotypes that are cast upon different members of our Canadian culture. Assignments like this also help to dispel some of the myths that exist within our culture. When entering the workforce from low entry-level jobs to top-level jobs, we are always going to have to work with people of different races or traditions. Using the First Nations people as an example, if we have studied their historical struggles or traditional beliefs, we are highly more likely to understand how they respond to different situations that may arise. In A1.1, we look at many different stereotypes. How many are true and how many are exaggerations, and how many are just false. By continuing this curriculum, future generations will learn about what Saskatchewan and Canadian culture is. I believe this will benefit the many more people who are entering our nation now as refugees and immigrants. The before, during, and after strategies is a practice that is beginning to feel more natural to me. One assignment where I felt this strategy really paid off was B12.1. Cross-country tour, how to get lost in Canada. I think it's interesting how I made the presumption that the story was going to be factual and serious based on previously reading the Oka crisis. During reading, I was interested and thoroughly enjoyed his writing style. I found this to be an entertaining read. After, when reflecting, I noticed how many details of the Canadian way of life he fit into such a comical story and adventure.